Hello and welcome. I am Angela B. Chrysler, and we'll be reading an excerpt from the upcoming release, Caught, by author and copyright holder, author MLS Weech, who has given authorization for this reading. This is sections from his Chapter 8, entitled Rescue. Caitlin Olhauser forced herself to keep running, but she wouldn't hold out much longer. Her lungs burned for air as she ran through the alleys of a city she wasn't sure she'd ever been to before, and she didn't have her inhaler. It was simple, though. If it caught her, it would kill her. She ducked into an alley and behind a garbage dumpster. Her legs couldn't take any more. Gasping for breath, she simply tried to beg air to fill her lungs. She focused. Just a small breath. A little one. Good. Another, a bigger one. A goat's hoof slammed down in front of her, form around the front of the dumpster. She glimpsed a bull's horned head just as she turned to scurry away. The dumpster flew in front of her, landing just in the direction she meant to run. The creature screamed, and it was all the more terrible because it was a man's scream coming from that monster. She tried to run in another direction. A bolt of lightning lit up the night. In that instant, she saw it. It was huge, bigger than any man she'd ever seen. It had bowed goat legs and black hooves. Its bullhead had horns as long as her arms. Between the impossible combination of animals were the chest and arms of a large, muscular man. The lightning faded just as the creature turned black eyes at her. Rain plummeted from the sky. Caitlin turned to run and slammed right into the man-shaped chest of the creature. She moaned. For some reason, she'd never been able to scream. She could shout at times, but there was something that kept her, some part of her anyway, bottled up. She heard herself moan and knew it would be a wail of terror from any other girl her age. She turned away even as the creature snatched her up by an ankle. For an instant she thought there were two creatures, but as the creature pulled her down, she only saw one. She fell hard on her stomach, grunting with a force. Her asthma struck again. She gasped for breath even as she tried to shout for help. Caitlin struggled to breathe, even as she fought to keep the minotaur-like beast from the wrapping chains around her arms and legs. It had dragged her bodily into one of the buildings of the alley. The building seemed to be shape itself as the beast brought her in. It seemed to shift from an empty building, maybe an old department store, into a dungeon. She had more success getting her breathing under control than keeping the monster from wrapping her up like a knot. "Help!" She wanted it to be a shout, but she hadn't done that for years now. She could talk loudly if she tried, but any extreme sounds from her were next to impossible. The creature brought its grotesque face down to hers. It was so close she could only see the top of its snout and those black, lifeless eyes. She could feel its hot breath against her cheeks. That stare was more effective than a gag. Fear seized Caitlin's tongue. It let out a human grunt of approval before it rose, towering above her. Shaking, Caitlin stared at it. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't hurt me." The creature roared a deep chuckle. She'd done the wrong thing. It wanted her to be terrified. It wanted her to die from fear more than anything else. She clenched her eyes shut, not wanting to see it kill her. She heard 3 loud clops before she opened her eyes to see the creature walking out of the strange dungeon in which it had brought her. It was still large, but instead of being empty, it seemed to fill with stone slabs and metal cages. The white stone walls became gray. Moldy beams formed above her, and black chains hung loosely wrapped around the beams. She saw someone hanging by his neck from one of the chains. The wood creaked as the body swung from the chain, but the beam held, if only to provide Caitlin a horrific pendulum to keep the time. A surge of fear more than help gave her the strength to pull at the chains that bound her. Struggle as she might, it actually seemed as if the chains grew tighter as she struggled. She focused her attention on her bonds, knowing she had only moments. As if to mock her, a roar echoed into the room. She lifted her gaze, expecting to see the monster return, and was shocked to see a golden lion stalk into the room. It was him. She'd had 1,000 nightmares, maybe 1,000,000. She'd never counted. But recently, for some reason, the lion had started appearing just when she thought she'd die. She saw the lion and understood. She knew him. She knew it was a him, and she knew it wasn't really a lion. It was, well, more than that. A part of her, the part that knew lions weren't particularly picky eaters, was still afraid. But for the most part, Caitlin thought the golden lion would die before it hurt her, or allowed her to come to harm. It looked at her. Its huge dark eyes held so much compassion, Caitlin thought it was about to weep. "Help me," Caitlin whispered. "Don't let it get me." The lion drew itself up and let out a sigh. Caitlin thought it looked like a person who was about to do something that would hurt himself bad. It turned and stalked out of the room. "No!" Caitlin said. To her it was a shout, a wail of betrayal and sadness, but only came out a flat request. She stared at the entrance. She nearly gave a ball of hope before she saw a shadow approach. A man walked in. It was a man she thought she knew, even though she'd never seen him before. He was a soldier, or marine, or some type of military person. She'd seen movies, and the uniform the man wore looked like the military men from the movies. Square and strong with black hair, he looked at her and smiled. His white teeth seemed all the brighter behind his dark tan skin. "I found you," he said. "I knew you would." The words were out of Caitlin's mouth before she knew she was going to say them, but they were true. She knew it when she saw him, even before she saw the strange patch on his right shoulder. There, velcroed onto the man's uniform, was an embroidered golden lion. He'd been protecting her for a while now. He just looked a little different. For starters, he was a man. He stood there with a straight back that looked like it could carry a mountain if it had to. His dark eyes made it seem as if he'd already carried a heavy burden. She smiled. Then the man flew across the dungeon. She hardly knew what happened. One moment he was there smiling, such a gentle smile. The next she had to crane her neck to see him land. Caitlin turned to see the bull-headed monster howl with rage. It charged her. Caitlin clenched her eyes shut, waiting to feel the monster crash into her. She felt a gust of wind and a herd of collisions of bodies. She opened her eyes to see the monster lift the man, her golden lion with one hand. The monster sneered at the man, tossing him aside like a bag of garbage. Caitlin gasped as the man fell in a heap. The monster turned to her. It stalked toward her and nearly tripped as the man dove at one of his goat legs. The leg didn't so much as bend, but he held onto his so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You can't have her!" he growled. He sounded every bit the lion he appeared to be moments ago. "Not this one! Damn you, I'm going to save one!" The monster let out another howl. It bucked its goat leg, and the man rolled more times than Caitlin could count into a heap of tools and chains. She thought his head hit something. "Don't hurt him," she said. She wanted to shout it. She wanted to unleash every ounce of bottled up anger she'd ever had, but she didn't know how. The monster turned its black, hate-filled eyes at her. A few quick strides brought it to her. The noise it made started out a roar of glee, but its tone shifted high like a shout of pain. Something flashed in the corner of Caitlin's eye. Whatever it was buried in the Minotaur's leg. A man appeared behind the monster, lifting what turned out to be the claw-black end of a blood-soaked hammer from the beast's leg. A brief fount of blood burst from the leg as the man reared the weapon back. The monster backhanded her savior again. He rolled with the blow and came up so quickly Caitlin thought she'd imagined it. The monster looked from the man to Caitlin. It growled angrily, then backed away. Caitlin saw its leg bleed from where the man had dug that hammer into it. They both watched its shadow fade away before she turned to the man. "Are you real?" she asked. She could feel her asthma trying to take her breath from her. She focused on breathing. She reveled in every one of the minuscule breaths she could wheeze into her lungs. "I was about to ask you the same thing," he said. He sounded tired, but there was an edge to his voice, like he was scared. "I'm real," Caitlin said. Her breathing became more normal. I think I'd think you'd say that if I made you up," the man said. "But I'm real," she said. "Oh, that matters," he said. "I'm taking you out of here." She felt her lips quirk. To her it was as big a smile as she'd ever given. She'd never been good with emotion, especially anger or joy. She felt it, but for her, showing those emotions was impossible. He walked up to her and bent to unravel the chains and pick her up. Okay, thank you very much.